Well, good evening. I'm Rick Dancer, and welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. We're really glad to have you. I'm sorry I'm just a little bit late, but our guest tonight is Al Peterson, and he and I were already laughing and talking about some of the things that we've been on here for like 20 minutes talking. So we've been catching up and doing some stuff, and you guys are going to get to hear from him in just a second. And yeah, I know, Psycho Fu, you're excited to see Al. He'll be up here in just a second. You're already out there waiting. I don't know how YouTube does it. That's kind of the mystery for me. Our show tonight is sponsored by Chris Dano, Dr. Michael Bratlin. If you're looking for a dentist, looking for somebody who will take care of you, he's a great client of ours, sponsors lots of shows. As I always say with all my clients, they don't always agree with everything we talk about, but they do agree that we should be talking. And so he, a couple months ago, came to me and said, Rick, you should start doing, we should do some series on, former news. I was going to say old, but Al's here now and he can hear me. Old former news people, and have them come on and talk about what they're doing now in kind of the old days. So we had John Fisher a couple months ago. Last month we had Shelley Kurtz. And so tonight there's Al Peterson. Hey, Al, you're on.
Hey there, guys.
There he is. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Life's good. I cannot complain. I've
So
got my dog Callie down here.
you guys, Al. If you guys don't know, well, Al's like an animal freak.
Yeah.
He would always try to bring new animal idea shows to the KEZI crew. I remember that. And one of the most frustrating things for Al and me, we're just going to kick right into this, about working at KEZI in the day, is we'd come up with these great ideas. And you'd go into the office and you'd talk about them. And then some salesperson would walk in and the whole idea would change and it would go away. And I've never, so many times out looking at you and just us going, oh my God, if they would just try something different,
Exactly. We had the chambers were awesome. And I have to say, Carolyn in particular, I think Carolyn just liked running she didn't get in there and bother us. She never once came in, looked at a script. But she enjoyed us having fun. And then Scott came in, and Scott was a little more uptight. But the real problem was who your bosses were and how much creativity would they allow. There were some people who were really afraid of fun.
Yeah.
They really were. And so we scared the crap out of them. We did, because it'd be kind of like, we're having fun. And they're sitting there, they're going, there's something wrong here. They're laughing too much, because you remember how news used to be. It's like, this is the news, and that's how it was, and all that stuff. Yeah, no, I agree, but we did it anyway.
Yeah, and
we found ways to do stuff. Yeah,
and one of the things I think I always appreciated about you is that you and I were both kind of these antagonistic people. That it was like, I will never forget, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but when you got fired at KEZI. And so Al goes into the office. Nobody knows this is going on. And Rick Jacobs says to him, whatever.
Rick didn't fire me. It was those two bald fellas, that one tubby guy down in two tubby guys.
Oh, it was Mark from
Sean and Mark.
Yeah. So Al is in the office and it's in our newsroom, and Al walks out. I'll never forget this. And you said, okay, they just fired me, but I'm not supposed to tell you, but I want you guys all to know I just got fired. And of course we're in shock, but I'm like, also, because I'm feeling like, what the hell? But then it's also like, Al, you got biggest balls I've ever met on anybody.
Can I tell you a quick story there? So I was a meteorologist. I was doing weather at that time, and I have rental houses all over. And I had a house in West Fir with a hole in the roof. In other words, I'd done all the woodwork, but no tar paper and no roofing yet. And it was going to rain. And I knew it was going to rain up there at 3:30. And this was 12:30. They pulled me into the office. And I said to somebody, I think I'm getting fired. And they go, what? I go, no, I can kind of tell, because, Al, can you come in here for a moment? And so anyway, so they're talking to me. And first of all, the funny thing is I do remember them. They both had these, I can't focus on much. So I was just kind of like nodding my head. And these guys had these shiny brown suits, and they're both bald and little. And I just kept going, God, those are awful suits. Those are awful suits. And honestly, and I wasn't even worried about it. I knew what was going on. And then at a certain point, while we're going in a different direction, I stood up and I said, hey, guys, I'm sorry, but I've got a hole in my roof. I have to go patch it, and it's going to rain at 3:30. So you guys are doing great. I've had to fire people and I hate it. And I think you guys are doing wonderful. I've got to go. So can you just roll my stuff outside or do you want me to come back? The guy from Medford, he was mad. I thought they'd be happy that, okay, you've made it easy on us. The guy from Medford was mad. He wanted a pound of flesh. And then the other guy, the new guy, Sean, he was just, I think he was relieved because this was at the end of a whole bunch of firings. But the crazy thing was, because I didn't really need the job anymore. And so it's funny, if a girl breaks up with me and breaks my heart, oh God, I'm devastated for decades. If you fire me from a job, I don't know why, it doesn't bother me in the least. And so anyway, but then I got up, but I got on the roof, I nailed it down. I did not have time to think about it. All of a sudden it started raining at 3:30. And I go, I got that done. All of a sudden I said, hey, wait a minute.
You just got fired.
Yeah. But I will tell you this, I worked my ass off on the real estate for so long that by that time I didn't really need the job. And I said to myself, as I'm sitting up there and the rain's beginning to fall, I said to myself, if you lost every penny tomorrow, it would be worth it just for the joy of being able to stop somebody mid-sentence and saying, guys, I got to go. I have to leave. And so I'm sure what I did was, guys, you got fired. I got to run. I forgot that part about it, but no, it was wonderful. And the interesting thing is, I stayed very close with the family. The family and I got along fine. I really liked them a lot. And in fact, they invited me back to their 50th anniversary party. So I got invited. Remember the big 50th?
Yeah.
Downstage?
That's the first time I saw John Fisher, and I didn't know who he was. I went up to Tracy Berry and I said, "Who's the hobo?"
I know he has that beard,
and he was bald, and I was just looking at him, and then I walked up to him, and John goes, "Hey, Rick," and I go, "Oh my God, John, you look," and it just came out. I go, "You look terrible." And I didn't, because he just looked like, he goes, "Thanks, Rick," and I went, "No, I'm sorry," but it was like
a story that I remember that won't embarrass John too much, although there's 1,000 John stories. Okay, so we had a producer who just wasn't very good at it. She'd been doing it for decades and decades. And when you come in to do the weather, you don't go from blood and guts stories to the weather. You have a threshold story where if it's really blood and guts, you give a couple of buffer stories before weather. But like 3 days in a row, they didn't do that. So John's sitting there waiting to come out to do weather. And 6 people died in a tragic house fire in Cleveland. And then it was probably you would have had to come out and say, changing gears now, which is the sign that the producers really screwed up. But John, instead of John coming out for the 3rd time, he did this. He hid under the desk.
I remember this. He ducked.
He hid under the desk and said, I ain't coming out to that. I laughed so hard. I think you probably had to toss to a break or something. But he just said, no, the producer isn't learning and I'm not going to come out. And, you can't go from this low to this high in one. I mean, you can't make a Karen Carpenter note where you go from low to high. It's hard.
So tell him the Black and Gus story.
Oh, that was crazy. Okay.
You got on every ABC funniest videos thing. I mean, that thing, if you had royalties on that, Al, you'd be a very wealthier man.
Well, you know what? The royalties did end, but they paid a lot for a long time. Not Dick Clark. Dick Clark Productions paid terrible, but there was an outfit called Brad Lockman Productions. And Brad Lockman did funniest home videos, back when you couldn't just pull them off the internet and you had to get a hold of guys like us to send them tapes. Anyway, that was back in the rip and read days before we had computers, literally. And so they would they'd send you something on the computer or they'd let you know what the rundown was. And then you would go through all this paper stuff, right? And find your story. So I needed a 1/2-minute story, 20-second story. And I was producing. So I ripped this thing off and it was like cows escape on the Jersey Turnpike. And so I pulled this thing off the wire and I'm reading like, okay.
Video. You had video of it too.
Yeah, we had video and we knew that, but we had to wait.
Al can't see the video. So he can't see the video, but he knows there's video rolling and he's reading the script. John Fisher's sitting next to Al. He is seeing the video. And so then go ahead, Al, and you say.
So what happened was I pulled this thing off the wire, and at the end of one line, it said the cows, comma, black, AN, and then GUS at the bottom. And somehow I thought that the cows were named Black, and they'd simply forgot to put the D on the and so it's Black and Gus. I typed it in, and it was hilarious because then John's sitting here, just like, maybe I'm wrong, but is it possible that those cows were Black Angus? I'm like,
and you lost it.
Oh,
you just went like crazy.
Well,
so
the funny thing is John was such a perfect foil for that. Other people would have, don't mention it. But John was kind of like,
because he kind of looked and he went, perhaps it's Black Angus, Al. and you just go, oh my God. I remember one time Lisa Birch, and this is kind of a sketchy, but this is YouTube, or this is, you can do it. But there was a new Surgeon General named Dr. Satcher. And Lisa was really good at she'd go, so Rick, don't go on the news and say Dr. Snatcher. And I go, Lisa, don't put that in my head. And she's going, no, don't say Rick, don't say. And so then we're sitting on the set, and it was those era where we were coming in and doing those side shots where you'd come in on the anchor,
Oh, that's right.
And so they get on me, and Lisa, right before the camera comes, I think she was Dr. Snatcher. And I'm like, oh no. So I get on there and I go, Dr. Satcher, like this. And then there was another story about him. And Lisa, she goes, in other news on Dr. Snatcher. And it was like, oh my God, she did it. And then we had to go to a break because we were both losing it. Like we went, oh, and they just go, we'll be right back after this. And we shut down.
Oh my God.
I'll tell people what Lisa did to you with that Polaroid picture of a car.
Okay. So I had an old 1980 Datsun 210, and it was my car. What happened was I went to Seattle to sell a car because it's hard to sell cars in Seattle and in Eugene. Sold it up there, stayed with my mom and dad, came home. The bus company was on strike. It was too expensive to fly. I had a big toolbox. I didn't want to hitchhike with a toolbox. So I bought a $275 piece of crud car. But I drove this 1980 210. It was okay. So I fixed it up. But everybody was like, dude, you're the guy on TV and you're driving this 15-year-old cheapest car ever made. But I liked it. Lisa and I got along great. One morning, I wake up, ring, 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 phone right to my house. No cell phones or anything. No message. Hello. I don't have a car for sale. No. Click. Ring, 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 ring. Hello. No, I don't have a car for sale. I don't care where it's posted. There must be a mistake. What Lisa had done, she and Norm Newweiler, the photographer, took a Polaroid of my car, typed up this piece of paper that said, car for sale, runs great gas mileage, $75. Call between the hours of 4:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. If I don't pick up, call back. And so just ring, 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 ring. No. And finally, then I finally.
Well, Al came into work and he's like, I got calls all night about my car being for sale. And you guys, Lisa was a trickster. I mean, she was a prankster, and she was, ruthless, especially to Al, because they were such good friends. You guys were super close. Yeah. And she could get away with anything. Because I used to say to her, if you do that to me, my wife will kill you. Literally, because she would do stuff. Okay, so tell them about the straw. And she had jaw surgery, and she had this ointment that deadened your lips. Yeah. And so what
happened was we were at KECI, and I went to Home Depot to get some pressure treated wood to do some work with, right? And so I load up all this pressure treated wood into my truck. And then I go by the Taco Bell, which was on Chad or someplace or nearby. And I got a veggie burrito. And I came back and I'm eating, I'm talking, and all of a sudden my lips start going numb. My whole face is going numb. And I'm like, oh, my face. And Lisa, as you know, was so good at, really, what's wrong? She didn't give any hint as to what's going on. And I'm like, I think that I must have gotten some of that pressure treated stuff on my fingers, and my face is getting paralyzed. So I called the poison.
Well, I was sitting there and she's going, Al, you better call the poison control center. And Al's going, you think? And Lisa's going, yeah, because I think you poisoned yourself. Well, I was there when you went to the bathroom and came back, and Lisa had Al's straw, and she found this ointment, that numbing ointment, and she goes, watch, and she puts it on his straw. So now I'm an accomplice, and Al is like, he calls the poison hotline and does the whole thing, and then it goes away. And like 6 months later, I don't remember if you remember this. Yeah. 6 months later, we're sitting there, and Lisa's doing in her drawer, and she pulls out the ointment, and Al has a cup of soda sitting there with a straw on it. And Lisa goes, oh, remember when I did this to Al? And she goes over, puts it on there, and I'm sitting here going, okay, God is testing me. You know, am I going to sit here? And Al takes it. He goes, Lisa, remember when I had that poisoning? I had that thing again. And Lisa goes, you better call the poison hotline. And I went, okay, I can't do this. Al, this is what Lisa did. And then the whole story came out because she never did tell him that's what had happened. I mean, she was such a prankster.
Well, but I got her back. Okay, so there was one night I'm producing the newscast, and I had to go home. So I was going to watch the newscast from home. And I knew. Now, Lisa was a pretty talented person. She did not have to pre-read her scripts. She was a cold reader.
Oh, I remember this. Oh, yeah, this is so good.
So you could put a script in front of her, and she was good enough, and the market was small enough that she was just going to read whatever you put in front of her. So I wrote her this script, came to the end of a block, and it was about skydivers dressed as Elvis in Nashville, and like 300 of them jumped out of the airplane. And so Lisa's reading the script. She hasn't pre-read it. And she's saying, no, there are 300 skydivers. It's the most skydivers ever dressed like Elvis. This was in Nashville celebrating Elvis's birthday. And then came the line that I wrote. You remember Elvis, dumb line, but she's reading it. He was famous for songs like All Shook Up and Suspicious Minds. You remember Suspicious Minds. It goes like this. So all of a sudden, she has read all the way to the point where she goes, it goes like this. And suddenly she realizes, that fucker. She reads this thing and she goes, it goes like this. Caught in a trap. I can't walk out because I love you too much.
Baby.
Straight broadcast. I did another one.
I remember the outtake because then she goes like this. Like over at you. And you loved catching Lisa because she didn't make a lot of mistakes.
No.
When you get catch doing something, it was right. So Al, I don't know if you know, she used to do this to me. I have to be careful with this because this is like a really nasty thing. But every night I do this. Remember that little camera in the old station that every night you go do the 11 o'clock teases?
Oh, yeah,
you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So for like 6 months, we got that closed captioning. And we didn't know what it was because it was brand new. And so Lisa used to joke, she'd try to get you screwed up. So she'd go on there and she'd write some nasty thing before my tease. Right before I'd get up there, she'd hurry up and change it and edit it, and up would pop this thing. And it was always something about my penis. And it was like, hi, I'm Rick Stick in My Pants Dancer. I mean, it was like really, and I can't give you the worst ones, but it was like, I never read them, but you just go, God, I hope I can get up to this before Lisa gets there. So we're 6 months in, and one night the closed captioning comes up and I'm reading it. It says, I'm Rick with a honking big, on and on like this. And I'm of course I'm not reading it, but all of a sudden I go, Lisa, that's on the closed captioning. She goes, no, it's not. I go, no, Lisa, I think it is. And she goes, what? And I go, I think it's on the closed captioning. And Lisa goes, so she goes back to engineering. We re-roll this tape and we're going, oh my God, it is. For 6 months, all these nasty phallic jokes about my penis have been going out there to the deaf community. And no one's ever said anything. Lisa and I we were so frozen that whole night. We're going, I hope nobody ever calls. But there's probably a whole cult of people out there going, hey, let's see what Rick Dancer calls it tonight,
Well, you see, here's the thing, is we had to, see, the mistake there was that it could come back to whoever wrote the script and they could figure it out. And like when Lisa did not admit the putting the stuff on, that was so that she could go into the news director's office if anybody caught her and she could just go, that's not true. Just you're going to save your job. I did this once though to Carrie Stewart. You remember Carrie?
Oh yeah.
So I produced the newscast. Same thing. Carrie did not pre-read scripts. She wasn't as good a reader as Lisa, but she was a decent reader. And so I wrote a headline that was supposed to say, "Big doings in Cottage Grove." It may have been mining days or whatever. Big doings in Cottage Grove. But I took the I out of doing. And so she comes up, "Big dongs in Cottage Grove." Just, what? What is this? Al, did you? And I'm like, oh, I left the I out. It's supposed to be doings. Big dongs in Cottage Grove. And okay, now we could have been fired for any of this, but here's the crazy thing. They couldn't fire us because somebody had to be doing this stuff.
Right.
I mean, if it wasn't, it would be like a parfait Jello thing that nobody mixed right. You know, it would just be kind of bland and brown. And as you know, we worked with some people who had no sense of humor, none.
Right.
And who, frankly, put together boring stories, boring newscasts, and whatever. I don't know about you, but there were times it'd be like, okay, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say this. But this newscast is worse than bad. This newscast is entirely forgettable.
Right.
And that's really the worst thing, because when they do the research and say, "What do you think of Rick? What do you think of Al?" The one thing you don't want to be is to be so forgettable they don't know who you are. So we just had the fun. And then the other cool thing was get all these really stiff people out of college because they didn't know how far they could go. Right. And I'd be doing morning shows. And what I would do is, okay, this is how far you're supposed to go. This is how far I go. But you co-anchors, or if I go that far and don't get in trouble, that means you guys can go this far. You can get a little, and then you taught people to have fun. You know.
Well, don't you think too that, like, I always thought this with you and me, is you and I had enough age and wisdom. I mean, and I don't mean that like we're the smartest guys in the world, but we knew what we could get away with.
Yes. Yes.
And Al and I could push a little harder, even than Lisa. Because Lisa wanted to please, and that's not a bad thing.
And Lisa was also moving on.
Right.
She was always afraid this would end up in Boston or something. Yeah.
Right. So you and I knew we could push these levels to that, and we made some news directors really unhappy.
Oh boy, did we! But you know, I have to say, well, Rick, the reason you were able to is you had all the viewers. I mean, I had my research all said, Al, they either love you or they hate you. But they all know who you are, which is fine, because if they know who you are, remember Howard Cosell, they either loved or hated him, but he was Howard Cosell, and everybody knew him. You had just a ton of viewers. And the thing is, there was a certain point where I realized whenever they let me go, there'd always be an outrage. There'd always be angry people. They didn't want to go through that. So we could do that. And the other thing was, if you had that many viewers, they couldn't really throw they really couldn't come after you very hard, because how hard do you want to push the guy who has 40% of the viewers saying they're only watching for him, which was you? So we could get away with that stuff.
Right.
We could get away with that stuff. And the problem was, once we realized how much we could get away with, once we realized at a certain point, Scott liked us more than the people that was disciplining us.
Yeah.
Were disciplining us. It was kind of like you could just sit there and go, no. And what I learned quickly, admit you're wrong, say you're right, I shouldn't have done that, I won't do it again, because it took away all of their ammunition. And pretty soon they're like sputtering, going, but. And I'm like, yeah, I admit it. I would get one time.
But don't you think the key, though, Al, was to push? I mean, you and I always pushed them past their comfort zone, because it was like, you know, and you and I went by I think the motto, ask for forgiveness later, because I'm going to try this and see. And I think that's why our stories always did better when we did award things. It's because we wrote like we were, not like they wanted us to.
And we also said, you know what? This is the story. If you're at a story with 4 other reporters from the 4 other stations when Fox had one, let's just say 3. You're one of the 3 reporters, and you know what these other 2 are going to do.
Yeah.
And you're tempted to do the exact same thing, but you're like, life is too short, and that is really boring. I think what I'm going to do is let them do the obvious, and then I'm going to go out and try to find something fun. And that was cool. But you know, you stop and think about it. You and I, it wasn't just the bosses that were angry at us. There was also the capital J journalists who.
Oh God, yeah.
they'd show up out of college. They were so smart. They knew everything. Everything was deadly serious. And it's like, no, this is tax increment financing. Do that story in 15 seconds and get on with it. And they come up with 2 minutes and we'd be like, oh God. And I really felt like there had to be somebody in there saying, don't go, stay. Hey, look at this. This story's interesting. Before you leave, give us a chance on this one. And then you would keep people. I mean, I worked with people who couldn't stop a channel changer with a harpoon. It's just, they were so dull. Do you remember at the 11 o'clock news, we had that thing called the loser block?
Yeah. I forgot about that. You knew that nobody was ever going to watch that.
Well, what happened was, at that time, the newscast went from 11 to 11:37. And the consultants came to town, and you and I had fun, but I say we were very scientific about, if you told us something, we were going to keep it in mind. And so what the consultant said is, okay, you start at 11, you're going to lose 50% of your audience at 11:15. You're going to lose 70% of that audience by 11:30. So naturally, if you had most of your viewers right up here, you had to front load that show. But then there would be the stories that we had to run. And you have trains? Cool. We'd have these stories that you had to run because it was the Eugene Ballet has a guest artist all the way from Spokane. And you're thinking, okay, look, are they good at ballet in Spokane? Is it really that good of a story? Is this going to make anybody go see the ballet because some famous guy from the Spokane Ballet? And it's like, no, but the owner, or excuse me, it'd probably be the news director, knew Tony Pimble or whatever. So you take a story like that and we dump it into the loser block. And the reason for that was that by that time in the newscast, nobody was watching. Now we had to be careful because people began to realize what it was. And we'd have reporters say, hey, Al, so I see my stories in the loser block. I remember that one lady, Kirby, the one that was the producer, the sweetest girl. I wish I could remember her name. Julie Lopez.
Oh, yeah. I ran into her. Yeah, her husband, yeah.
Yeah. She did a report, and she decided she wanted to get a reporting tape up. And she just comes in there. It's by 9 o'clock, you had the rundown. She goes, my story's in the loser block. That's it. But believe me, you and I would put our stories in the loser block if that's where they belong.
Right.
But we were scientific about it. And the other thing that I was thinking about this before the interview. We were not only the institutional memory, but we were the watchdogs for the entirety of the future of that station.
Right.
Because you remember we had one news director. I'm going to tell you this story. This one's awesome. But we had a news director who was, I'll just call her the meanest woman on earth. I won't use
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
You don't have to say a name. I knew that one.
She was just as mean as a boil, as my mom used to say. Oh, gosh.
Remember this?
Yeah, that's right. And then she'd,
the door would open and there was fire that would come in first, and you go, I think that's the breath of Satan that she just was slept with tonight.
Thank God, though, she was bad at being mean. She was mean to the chambers too, and since the family knew that, she didn't have much ammunition against us. But she decided one day that it would be a good idea to do a story where we put a reporter in an unmarked van and we see if that reporter can lure children in to show how easy it would be to lure children into a van. And I know where she was going. But this one reporter, and you know him, he married, he's a wonderful guy. She's a wonderful woman. They got married. They're up in the Seattle area. And I heard what was happening. And I said, I won't use his name. I said, but look, I don't mean to interrupt, but you can't do this. And the reason you can't do it is you'll do this story, and I'm sure you'll do a great job. But 80% of the people are going to know what you did. 10% are going to be a little confused, like, what just happened? But about 10% are going to think you actually lured children in. And I told them, you could go, if you live in this town for 20 years, I promise there will be certain people who actually think you're a pedophile. They will believe that. He goes, "You're right, I can't do it." And so he did not do it. But you see, what we had was those people could have a scorched earth policy and leave. They could F things up for all of us. We would have to go back into the community and try to patch it up. Meanwhile, they're down in Las Vegas,
Right.
starting a whole new career, having scorched the earth where we are. And then we even had some reporters that were that way, who they didn't work hard until they saw a story that they thought could win, that would look good on the resume tape.
Right.
And then they threw everything into it, and they were very unethical. They were fast and loose with the facts. And you could say, hey, I don't think that was all accurate, but they didn't really care. So we had to be the people that were always there. And when everything was looking awful or was about to look awful, we had to be the people that said, no, we're not going to do it.
Right. Because don't you think, Al, I think that's what's kind of missing, and I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but I'm just saying, I don't think there's the institutional knowledge of the community nor the care about what happens, where we really were. You own lots of homes and properties in this.
We weren't leaving.
We were here, and it was like, you were a watchdog for this. And you and I did tons, more than anybody else, of public speaking events or emceeing things. So we were the face of KEZI when you went out there. So when that face was muddy, you weren't going to let that happen because it was us. You know what I mean?
We were going to have to fight it once we got out into the community, but we were also going to be the guys who, a year later, I wonder why they're not returning my calls. What's going on? And we had to make sure that all that stuff got taken care of. And we also had to, sometimes it was out of our control because it may have happened in a midday show that we had nothing to do with. And so we had to attack it that way. And also, though, one thing that I was aware of, you can come out of your schools and whatever and say, we're just going to, so what if we burn bridges? We're journalists. We're this, we're that. You and I were the people there that were saying, we need to choose our battles. We're not just going to burn a bridge here unless you if you've got some great journalism there, but we've got to be careful about this. And so we were the ones out there trying to fight for it. But again, and there was some damage. I remember during the Thurston high school, the Thurston shooting. God, do you remember all the national media that showed up? I thought national media, they're going to triple check, they're going to double check, they're going to have editors. They just told lies. They were just.
They snuck into hospital rooms. They snuck into
carrying stuffed animals.
Yeah.
That one lady carried a stuffed animal saying that she was related to somebody. And then who was it? Was it the lady that worked for Sacred Heart, went to work for Mackenzie Willamette?
Rosie Pryor.
Rosemary Pryor was like, hold it. I mean, they took, but the point is that even that we had to work on.
But you remember that I remember with Thurston, though, as it kept going on, we started becoming the local media became the heroes because we were not doing that.
Exactly.
It became one of these things where it really did define that as we were the people who were being true to the story and really making sure people were, doing
naive. I really thought the higher you go, the more layers of checking you have to do. No, not.
I remember saying that, we're out there. It was the day of the incident. And I remember somebody asking me, I think it was Lisa, because she was in the station, and I was out there with you. And I remember her turning and asking me, she goes, so what's this like? And I said, for some of these journalists, this is like a dream. I said, this is the big story, students dead.
Get them out. Yeah.
And I said, and then for the rest of us, we're doing that. Well, you know what I found out like weeks later is ABC News, they took that, and college campuses were using that video to call me a sleazy journalist. And look what journalists do. Took it and twisted it around like, look, he's saying this is like this great story, and I was talking about them.
Right. Wow.
And I remember Scott Chambers calling me up in his office with the news director and saying, don't tell anybody in the station. We don't want other people to know, but this is what people are saying about you around the country. And you need to understand this, that we don't agree with them. We know how you did it. But if this comes back, we're going legally, they were going in and trying to get those tapes, and they got everything out. But isn't that scary?
Well, and you know what else is scary is people don't know this. And you and I only know these people. We worked with people who hated television news. We worked with people who we worked with a reporter who for 20 years, let's say 10 years, bragged that she didn't have a TV. we had a news director who just really didn't like TV news. They were almost on the other side and were just trying to kind of water down what we did at times. And whereas you and I loved it. I enjoyed every minute of it. I enjoyed the give and take. I enjoyed the screw ups. That's why I was so big on bloopers. Is I there are plenty of people, believe me, if they could find a way to record all newscasts in advance, they would. I didn't want that because, first of all, doing live, mixing your stuff live would it added an intensity to it.
Right.
It added a danger to it. You were on a tightrope where you could fall off one way or the next, and how you could judge us was based on how were we going to do with it. Now the bosses hate it because I had a great time.
But you and I were like loose cannons out when I got live, and that's why I loved what I'm doing today. Is because somebody saw this when live Facebook and YouTube came out. Somebody goes, Rick, you got to try this, and I jumped right on it because it was like when I did live shots. I almost said her name, but nobody had control of me. They'd be here and they'd be going, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that, and I just do what I was going to do. And you know what? What I loved about it is it always worked. And they always had to shut up because it did work. And you just went with what you could. And that's why I think live for you and me was so fun. They couldn't control us.
We know it was also fun.
They couldn't control you on the set either.
No, and the funny thing is part of that was just I'm a little obnoxious. The other part of it is I really think we're too serious. I mean, you could drone everything into the ground. You could beat it with a hammer until there's nothing left. But I have to say we did have fun. One of the great things that we had that they don't have now are these great photographers. I can't tell you how many times I'd be out with like Rob Woodward and I'd say, Rob, I know we're supposed to do this and this, but I think there's really something really interesting. If you can just get some really good video, I think we can make something really interesting. And he just go, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And those guys were amazing. They were amazing. Rob's did.
Bill Getz, you have Kurt Richter.
They were all world-class photographers.
And what I loved about working with a photographer is you'd go to write your story and you'd put it together, you'd voice it, and then you'd hand it to them. And then you'd watch it on the news and you'd go, oh my God, they made it so much better.
Oh God.
Like you'd go, especially like Getz. He'd put he'd put in an opera and and other things, but you'd have this thing and you'd go, how did I get to be a part of that? That was really fun. And that's the thing I think they have lost because now you have reporters or just a photographer running out, grabbing a soundbite saying, what did you think? Tell me what you want me to know, which isn't journalism. And then they do it and they run back, they slap it together, and you don't have any storytelling. So it's not really
They may not have any talent. They may be a good writer, but if you can't get the good video, your writing is good. I don't know if you ever noticed this. You won more writing awards than I did, but it's either you or it was me, and one other guy slipped in once and won. But it's either you and it was or me. And one thing I always told people, I said, you don't realize this, and it doesn't make any sense unless you have experienced it, but you can't get an award-winning script written unless you have great video to write to.
Right.
Your words without video were meaningless. And so there was Sid Bates, who won like 4 years in a row. And Sid could be a rough guy to work with because he could be a grumbly guy. But I can't tell you how many times he'd be just in a terrible, terrible mood. And then all of a sudden he would see this video and he would stop in mid-sentence in a driving rainstorm, go open the rig, get the camera out, shoot some beautiful piece of video. And then Rob Woodward, the reason Rob could get everything on one take that took everybody else 3. But the reason was Rob started back in the film days when you used to have to edit with a razor blade and tape. And so he learned to edit in camera because if he could do a wide shot to the medium shot to the close-up in camera, then he didn't have to do it with that. Oh, no, it was brilliant. They were wonderful.
I remember Kurt Richter. I used to work with him a lot.
He was brilliant.
And Richter would come up and he just knew when the question was coming up to be there. He'd be overshooting some video and he'd be talking, and then he'd come over like this and he'd come in and then he'd zoom in, and that would always be the soundbite I was looking for. You didn't have to go. There were some photographers you'd work with and you go, but by the time you did that, you lost it because people, then they're stopping in mid-sentence. And
The moment is coming, and we can't recreate the moment. Will you get, another one, Chris Nolan.
Yeah, Chris, he was great.
Chris was brilliant.
Didn't stay here very long.
No, well, I was amazed at the ones that did stay as long as they did. But my gosh, I do remember handing somebody a script and my voice saying, "I'm sorry, I wasn't on today. It wasn't a great story, but I'm not going to blame the story. I'm sorry." So and then put it on the air, and it was like, wow, great. I mean, they saved our butts. Yeah.
So what do you miss about the business?
You know what I miss mostly? I will say, as much as I was nervous when new people came aboard, because you never knew who you were going to get. I miss, number one, though, working with the really young people. Because all of a sudden, I mean, there are things going on right now that you and I don't know about because we're not working with a bunch of 20-somethings.
Right.
All of a sudden, some 20-something would come in and they'd be talking about some artist, some musician, or they come in with a saying. I remember one lady came in and said, an athlete, and she goes, "Yeah, that gal's a hoe." And I'm like, I have no idea what that meant. And so, but if you're a reporter, you ask them questions. I go, "Listen, what does that mean?" She goes, "Oh, I guess you'd say that girl's a whore." Oh, okay. But there was all that. The other thing was these intensely interesting personalities. I got to tell a Cor Harlan story.
Oh, I just talked to him like a year ago.
No, that's fine. And Cor is Cor. And,
yeah. But tell the story.
Cor was a scoundrel. Cor was just, he wasn't a dishonest guy, but he was one of these guys that could get things done. And he was maybe a little ruthless, but he was a very fine reporter. And I remember one time I'm sitting at the old Coconut Joe's on top of the Hilton. Dino Francois and I are up there having a beer. For some reason, we're not really into it, but it's Friday night. We're tired. We're going to have a beer. We're going to go home. Cor walks over. Cor had a voice that was a combination of E.T. Robinson and Mr. Haney. Hey there, Al. Hey there, Dino. It's like, we didn't know him very well. It's like, "Oh, hey, Cor, how are you?" He says, "Yeah, see that girl over there?" We go, yeah. She says, "I'm on a date with her, man. And as soon as she turns her back, I'm bolting out of here." And we couldn't quite hear what he said. I'm like, did he just say? And all of a sudden he's gone, right? And this lady is at a table with two other people in cowboy gear. And I can see why Cor left. He was not a cowboy. So she's looking at the table, waiting for her date to come back. And as time's gone by, she's getting a little more serious. She's getting pretty angry. Pretty soon, the whole table is staring at us because what he had done is come to stand by us because we were at his buds. But he came to stand by us because we were at the table by the door. Dino and I mean, we're going to write out that bad date. We may not have another, but Cor just bailed on him. And this lady and these people are getting mad. And I said, like, Dino, I just want to kill this. Let's get out of here. So we killed our beers. We bolted out. And then there was that John Goulet guy.
Oh, God, yes.
He was an LA guy in every sense, but he was, you might call him a womanizer, but it was just his style. He just knew a million women. And I guess since we're not working anymore, I'll just tell you. So one time we had this photographer, John Shelley, and John goes, "I'm going to hate working with that guy." I go, "Why?" "Well, every block we drive by, he points at a house. He goes, "Yeah, see that house over there, John?" "Yeah. Yeah, I bagged a chick there last night." "Yeah, over there too." "Yeah, let me tell you." But here's the crazy thing. He was, all I can tell you is my dog Sylvia liked people, but we were at some big barbecue down at Armitage Park, and John was there. Probably 100 people there. And Sylvia just saw him, walked right on over, sat on his feet, didn't want to leave him the entire night. So I'm kind of like, John, I like you. I've always liked you. He's a fine surfer and a great skier. But if my dog loves you, that's all I need to know. Same thing with my wife. She goes, if Sylvia loves him, then you don't talk that guy down to me because I figure the dogs do. But he was not a mean guy. It's just that he was from that whole LA thing that is so.
He'd say things that you go, you don't really, he would talk about how he would manscape.
Yeah.
And you go, and this is back when nobody really was talking about manscaping, and he goes, yeah, I shave my balls.
Yeah. Well, good. I can say about this one.
I mean, in a conversation, and you're like, did you just say that you shave your ball? I mean, is this really? He goes, yeah, it's called manscaping. And I went, oh.
Well,
okay.
see, that's the whole thing, because that's another world that came into our life. And then I remember one time, oh God, what was it that what he was doing? I forgot it, but he was just a guy. Oh, I remember. It's along that same lines. So here he is in liberal Eugene, and he's from Southern California, which is all plastic surgery, manscaping, womanscaping. If your boobs aren't quite big enough, you're going to get them bigger. If your butt isn't what you want, you're going to get all this. So he met this one girl. He goes, yeah, oh man, what a bad night. You really would have. Well, I met this chick down in at this one bar, and yeah, we went home, and she took off her clothes, and she said that lady was like a bear. And he was like, now we were aware that happened here, but he wasn't. And so, just to be crude, he goes, didn't know what to do, so I took one for the team. It's just
yeah. He was like, yeah, and it was so funny because he was so innocent about. He was kind of sleazy, but in an innocent, like a little kid way.
Only by our standards. I think where he was from, he was probably.
So Al, what don't you miss about being on television?
Well, okay, so toward the end, and one of the main reasons I got out is I had to sign another contract with Sinclair. Sinclair is an awful outfit. They really are. I can say that. I don't have any friends working up there anymore, but you used to have to run their stories. When we got into this, you remember how many times did you do a story where it's like, politically, I disagree with this guy, but since I do disagree with this guy, I'm going to work so hard not to show a bias.
Yep, that's what she's.
It looks like I've shown a bias. It's going to be for them. I remember I once got sent out on a story covering not a fortune teller, but somebody that sees the future, whatever you call that. And the news director wanted me to laugh at her and say that, a psychic. Crazy thing, I was working with Bill Getz. I showed her all the respect because I couldn't say that she was wrong. She was making predictions, right? Crazy thing was, about 6 months later, Bill comes up to me and goes, remember that story we did with the psychic? He goes, it all happened. All of it happened, almost specifically.
Really?
They said. So that was interesting. The other thing that I do miss too is, and it's something this world needs more of, is we would get thrown into worlds we didn't know anything about. And we would go in with no knowledge, with our hands empty, thinking we might hate it. And then all of a sudden we realize you're a good guy. We completely disagree. Remember, there was the guy that when Dave Frohmeyer ran against Barbara Roberts,
yep,
they brought a guy named Al
Mobley.
Mobley, that was him. Okay, so I'm thinking, boy, this guy is far right of right, and he is so, he's just, I just don't know what I'm going to get out of this guy. I think it's going to be kind of, but you know what I liked about Mobley is all of these beliefs that he had, that he brought to the table, he sincerely believed.
Right.
He wasn't faking it in order to win votes.
Right.
This stuff. And I could say, so you have a problem with rock and roll lyrics. He says, yeah, well, I just think it really hurts kids. And I think it's just bad for America. But he wasn't just saying that like maybe a Ted Cruz or somebody on the left. He really meant it. And it was like, and I said to Doug, I said, Doug, that was interesting because for once I interviewed a politician who said exactly what he felt.
Right.
Did you hate it when you'd be interviewing somebody and the current governor, Kate Brown, is the worst.
Yeah.
You ask her a question that might have some little difficulty getting out of, and she'll completely change the subject, answer some completely different question, and the politeness of reporters in general usually allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
And it was hard to say, I'm sorry, Governor, and somebody did this recently, but that's not, you answered a question I didn't ask.
Right.
And then you'd force them back into the saddle and they would realize that didn't work. But they did that a lot. The other thing that I do,
that's what we used to do though, because you remember, I remember interviewing Bob Packwood, Ron Wyden, all of them, and you'd push and they'd get their stump speech. But if you were good at what you did, you kept asking until you had some information that they get off their game. You know what I mean? And you had to keep pushing. But today, I don't see a whole lot of pushing. I feel like a lot of people, it's almost like news has become public relations, not really news. You know what I mean?
I don't think they understand. They don't understand mission. They don't understand how much they can say. They don't understand media law. I learned something. I learned a lot from you, and I have to apologize if I didn't say it so at the time. But you had a way of getting people to give a good interview by doing something that ended up being brilliant. They would be spewing all the memorized stuff, boom, 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 trying to stay on this subject, and then you would ask, "But how does it make you feel?" And then all of a sudden, all the crap that they'd written down on a piece of paper to repeat over and over again, they couldn't. They all of a sudden would have to stop and say, "How do I feel?" And then you could get to the heart of the matter. Because then even the most hardcore, slick PR person would have to say, "Well, personally, since I have kids, I really want to see them back in school, and I really wish that they would pass this bond measure, but that's not my role." But then you see what you had done is you had broken through the brick veneer, and then they became real. And I don't know if you ever did this, but I remember interviewing people who were so nervous when they got on camera, and this was cheating, and they never got mad at me, though. I would just say, "Rob, I'm not going to let them know we're interviewing.
Yeah.
Let them know we're interviewing after we've shot it, and then I will ask them for permission." But what you had was just a normal person giving you a wonderful human soundbite. But the minute they knew the camera came on, their eyes got big, they got stiff, they give you bad sound bites like I would be giving you, but you just let them go. And then sometimes you'd be like, "We're all done. You just said it. I didn't tell you we were rolling the camera. Are you okay with how you said it?" And they'd say, "Did I sound good?" I said, "You sounded great." And I mean that.
Yeah.
The other thing that we did not do, we never burned bridges. We were always honest with people. We were always, "This is what's going to happen. This is what we are doing." And if anybody ever said, like, "I can't trust you guys," I could literally say, "I don't burn anybody.
Right.
I will get in trouble, but I will not burn you." And that was sometimes hard to bring home.
I used to do the same thing as I'd tell my photographer, I'd just tap them. They'd start the camera rolling, and then we'd start going. And about a minute or two into the interview, the person I'm in, they always used to go, they see the light, the little red light on the camera, and they go, are we rolling? And I said, "Oh yeah, we have been." So anyway, and just go on, and then just keep going. Because you knew that if you start off, "Okay, you ready to do the interview?" Then they're always going to come in well in their professional voice instead of just a person.
And so instead of saying, "It made me angry," "Well, we were exacerbated by the proclivities of," it's like, no, just do the Mark Twain thing, talk in plain English. Yeah.
So Al, last thing, because I have to make this under an hour, I can't get it on Instagram. That's a challenge. I just want to thank you because I remember you stuck up for me so many times in the newsroom, and when things would go on, Al Peterson would always go, "You know what? The hardest working guy in here is Rick Dancer, because he not only anchors 2 shows a night, but he's doing 2 or 3 stories every single day."
He could get away with doing nothing, but he's working his ass off. Nobody was going to make you work hard. They were going to keep you there, but you didn't let that stop you. Yeah.
Right. And I always appreciated you doing that, because you'd come to bat at a meeting when something was going on, or some jealous reporter who wanted my job would go, "Rick's not doing enough," or "Rick doesn't do this." And Al would always stand up and go, "Listen, Rick Dancer, and half of the other people that we worked with would do in the same position, didn't do half what we did." And you and I both worked hard, but it's not about me. I just want to thank you, because that did mean a lot. I always remember.
Well, it's funny. I don't remember that, but the cool thing is I know I learn more about people when they don't think anybody's watching.
Right.
And the same with you. And I love the way you work the phone, and I love the way that you could get interviews with people nobody else would interview. But we were lucky. We were in the golden age, bud. We had the golden age. We got to go to Russia. I got to go to Louisville. You got to go to Central America, didn't you?
Yeah.
Carolyn Chambers was an angel.
And also to Romania.
I mean, the Chambers were magnificent human beings, and I'm sorry that 3 of them are gone now.
Yeah.
But I'll say this to Silva. Silva, you had a great family. You have a great family, and I was so proud to work for them. Even though I got fired, I was quite proud to work for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a fun occupation, and we're still healthy, and we came out the other side, without having to do marketing for the nuclear energy industry.
Yeah. So far, I haven't had to put on a Walmart vest, so I'm hoping that doesn't come up either. But Al, thank you so much for coming on and joining us and with our audience and people. And I knew they'd enjoy you, and I hope you had fun. That was.
I had a fun time, and anytime you want to do it again, we should.
Okay.
Because there's so much more to say, but I feel like we were here at the right time for the industry and for the community. I really think so.
Yeah, I agree. Al Peterson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.
See you, buddy. So there you go. Al Peterson, back from the days of, he worked at KMTR, KECI, and KVAL. And you guys all remember him, his fun weather forecast, making it interesting, which you don't see a lot of out there today. You guys are saying great show. I'm glad to have it. Al, if you are on Facebook, you can see all the comments people are making. There's a whole bunch of people saying stuff. You can go in there and comment back to them if you want to. It's kind of up to you. You guys, I'm going to wrap this up so I can get it on Instagram tomorrow because I want people to see Al. Again, we want to thank Chris Dental and Michael Bratman for coming up with this idea. If you're looking for a dentist who doesn't care about your vac status, he just cares about you getting good dental care, you need to check him out. He's way into dental work. He's way into safety protocol. And he's also very much into your civil rights as an American. I'm Rick Dancer. Thanks for being with us. Tomorrow night, we're going to have a group on that's called Truthzilla, and they're going to challenge you. They're going to make some people mad, but they are going to have some fun. A new podcast in town. We'll see you.